Okay, now we are live and the public is slowly coming in, so I will wait a few seconds before launching the discussions. Okay, I think we will start now. I think some more people will join, but I would like to welcome you all to this second research webinar of the program on Pacific Island, co-led by Ifri and the Pacific community. I am Céline Pajon, I'm coordinator of the program, and I will be your host today. So our topic is about climate change, its impact on Pacific Island countries, and what has changed or not changed since the adoption of the Paris Agreement 7 years ago, where important commitments were taken. And I think it's a very good timing to all this webinar now, because as you know, there is a UN General Assembly going on right now, and the government of Vanuatu, supported by other states, is leading an initiative to ask for opinion of the International Court of Justice on climate change. And indeed, for the Pacific Island, climate change has had very concrete implications for years now. Islanders have seen the sea level rising, endangering the very existence of atolls. They have experienced increasingly violent typhoons and other natural disasters. They are to deal with multiple impacts and on their everyday lives. They are at the forefront of climate change impact, and they have been calling the rest of the world to awaken to this existential threat. On this side, the European Union has been a proactive leader in international negotiation on climate change. It strives to lead by example and do its share to mitigate and help supporting adaptation. But I think maybe only this summer, climate change has started to feel very real for European public opinion. We experienced a series of heat waves, mega fire, lack of water, with many serious impacts on biodiversity, agriculture, but also human health. Some have said this is the end of innocence for the Europeans on climate change. So I think this episode might help bridge the gap and maybe better understand what the population of the Pacific Island have been enduring, but also raise greater interest about the way the Pacific Islanders could adapt and are adapting and providing innovative solutions to tackle this issue. So this webinar is gathering a stellar panel of experts and decision makers, both from Europe and the Pacific, who will provide a diversity of perspective on this issue, including on how Europe and the Pacific can step up their cooperation in this domain. So let me briefly introduce them all. First, we will have Espen Ronneberg, who is advisor for the Climate Change and Environmental Sustainability Program at the Pacific Community. Then Stefano Signore is the head of unit at the Climate Change and Sustainable Energy Nuclear Safety at the Directorate-General for International Partnerships of the European Commission. Joachim Claudet is a research director at the Center for Island Research and Environmental Observatory at the French CNRS. And last but not least, Mr. Bakoa Kaltongga is a Care Minister of Agriculture, Livestock, Forestry, Fisheries, and Biosecurity, and the Special Envoy of the Republic of Vanuatu on climate change for the Pacific. So we have a very good panelists, and I thank you them all for being here for us today. But before starting the discussion, I would like to share with you a special message recorded by the Prime Minister of Vanuatu, Mr. Bob Loughman, especially for this occasion. So I will share my screen and launch the video.
Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I bring you greetings from the government and the people of the Republic of Vanuatu. Today, I address you in the midst of a climate crisis. We are no longer measuring this emergency only in terms of carbon emissions or degrees of Celsius, but also in human rights violations and lives lost. Here in the Pacific Islands, we face existential threat. Climate is not a future problem. It is right now the single greatest threat in the livelihood, security, and well-being of our Pacific people. More than the slow and devastating sea level rise eating away our shorelines and Category 5 superstorms ripping apart our infrastructure. The Pacific has already lost a huge portion of our coral reef due to ocean acidification and severe coral bleaching. We are subject to alternating droughts and floods that have completely undermined our food and water security. And the dread multiplying effects of climate impacts on our already vulnerable island communities is more than we can bear. Our economies routinely suffer damages of more than 50% of our GDP from climate extremes, taking us back decades in our aims for sustainable development. And all of these 7 years of Paris and just over 1.1 degrees of global heating, can we fathom the devastation 1.5 degrees will bring to our blue Pacific? So believe me when I say that the Pacific is out of time, already at zero emissions and already investing huge percentage of our own budget to address climate impacts. The Pacific is showing its climate leadership. Excellencies, the world's political leadership has not yet taken this crisis fully to heart. And so we continue to see expansion of new fossil fuel projects and a failure to commit the finances, technology, and political will to avoid catastrophic loss and damage. This is why Vanuatu is stepping up and will put forward a resolution at the upcoming 77th General Assembly of the United Nations calling on the International Court of Justice to give an advisory opinion on the obligation of states and the international law to protect the rights of present and future generations against the adverse effects of climate change. The only UN principal organ that has not yet weighed in an issue of climate change. We will ask the International Court of Justice to provide emergency review of how existing commitments made by states in treaties and conventions on human rights and the environment would motivate more climate ambition and the Paris Agreement. Let me be clear, this is not a court case or liquidation. Vanuatu does not seek to assign blame. This initiative is about what we must say, not what has been lost. This is a campaign to build ambition, not division. This is a campaign to uplift the goals of the Paris Agreement. When Vanuatu tables this resolution to bring climate change to the International Court of Justice this year, we humbly seek your support and your nation's vote. We also ask Europe to continue to show global leadership in phasing out entirely the production, combustion of fossil fuel and take the world on a pathway of sustained, radical, socially just cuts to emissions. Now, not later. Excellencies, I wish you luck in the dialogue today, an important forum for our European partners to better understand our content and become allies in the ambitious solution being put forward by the Pacific Islands to protect fundamental human rights and sustainable development from climate change. Thank you, Thomas. God bless you.
Well, that was the very good, very strong, I believe, message from Prime Minister Loughman. I invite all the participants on this panel to jump in later on and provide their remark or thought about this message. Would be very interesting to exchange about that. And we are really honored that the Prime Minister accepted to share this insight, because I think it's demonstrating that the Pacific Islands are not only the vulnerable, actor that in front of climate change that we usually depict, but they are also proactive actors and solution providers to it. So now the panelists have been waiting for a while. I'm aware of that. Thank you for your patience. It's your turn now, and I will ask first each of you to deliver your own remarks, and then I will make you react to each other, and we will open the Q&A session. So to the audience, do not hesitate to write down your question in the Q&A box so that I can direct the question later on to our panelists. So let's start with Mr. Espen Ronneberg from the Pacific Community. Espen, if you're ready, the floor is yours now.
Thank you very much, moderator. And I was very much inspired by what the Prime Minister of Vanuatu had to say. I've been working on climate change in the Pacific for 30 years now. And I certainly have seen a lot of impacts. I've seen a lot of what he was talking about. So it really inspired me. And it has to be said that the Pacific Island countries have been at the forefront of climate change action for decades. I mean, the region was amongst the first to really take this issue seriously, as they were concerned about impacts happening in the early 1990s. They also realized that they needed to proactively show the international community that they were not sitting idly by and just awaiting impacts, just like the Prime Minister just noted. So if you look at the adaptation to climate change side of things, so after completing fairly detailed vulnerability studies, the Pacific embarked on ambitious but somewhat exploratory adaptation projects. The focus was on food security, water management, coastal protection. These were financed through the Global Environment Facility, but topped up by Australia. And further adaptation work was implemented through the EU's Global Climate Change Alliance program in the region. And these have assisted with a better understanding of what are the adaptation needs. But I have to say that capacity to implement remains a challenge. On the mitigation side of climate change, the Pacific has, of course, insignificant levels of emissions if you look at it globally. But political leaders have recognized the value of being at the forefront of the renewable energy and energy efficiency movement. France and Germany supported the process of developing the initial nationally determined contributions ahead of the Paris conference. And subsequently, the Pacific realized that further support was now needed to implement and enhance these NDCs. And a Pacific NDC hub was established under the leadership of Fiji, but with support from Germany, the United Kingdom, and Australia. And this hub has done excellent work in assisting the region, and there is a possibility of some further support coming from the EU. Those discussions are ongoing. But however, again, the region has challenges in capacity to implement, as well as in accessing finance for renewable energy, but also in finding renewable energy solutions that are fit for the size of the islands. Loss and damage has long been a Pacific concern. I mean, this goes back to 1991, when an insurance proposal was put forward by the government of Vanuatu, who at the time was the chair of the Alliance of Small Island States. But we realized that the international community is not taking sufficiently ambitious mitigation action, and adaptation financing is not flowing at the rates that are commensurate with the problem. So if the situation is not remedied, then the Pacific will certainly face inevitable loss and damage issues. Some work has been done. Germany has financed 3 loss and damage capacity needs assessments, which have been very helpful. They show the scale of the problem. And also, Germany has funded a project to look at comprehensive climate change risk management options, which includes insurance, risk sharing, and so forth. However, the outcomes of that project, those studies, still need to be financed and implemented. I would say, in general, the Pacific is severely capacity constrained and has numerous challenges in accessing climate change finance. We now do have in place 2 regional accredited entities, SBC that I work for and SPREP who I used to work for, but their ability to support accessing and implementing projects is limited. I mean, even a large organization like SBC is of the view that we could do a maximum of 2 projects each year. And larger projects actually may take up to 2 years to complete just the application process, not the implementation, just the application process. So the region needs capacity supplementation if we are to be able to absorb the needed climate change financing and also to implement the activities that are required. Now, we do have mechanisms in place through regional organizations, and there are major opportunities for cooperation between the Pacific and Europe, given the historical connections between a number of European countries and the regions, and connections created subsequently. We need to build on these to act on climate change together. This is not something that the Pacific can do by itself. It's something that requires a global push, and it has been heartening to see that the European Union and its member countries have indeed been supportive of a lot of the Pacific initiatives, a lot of the Pacific issues. But we need to do more. We certainly need to do more. And I'm sure we will hear from the Honourable Minister from Vanuatu about the advisory opinion. This is not an easy undertaking that they have embarked on. I was involved in a similar effort back in the 1990s when I was working for the Marshall Islands government on the legality of the use of nuclear weapons, and I can tell you it's not something that is an easy undertaking. And I congratulate Vanuatu for taking the initiative, and I will certainly do my best to support as much as I can from the position that I am now. But coming back to the topic of today, we have opportunities for cooperation between Europe and between and with the Pacific Island countries. Regional agencies like my own stand ready to facilitate and support as much as possible, but it is not something that any of us can do by ourselves. So I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today, and I look forward to any questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Ronneberg. Very useful background, general setting of what's going on now in the Pacific and what are the main challenges to tackle. And we are aware that more discussion, transversal kind of discussion between a lot of people from diverse horizons is needed to step up the useful and efficient cooperation. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Stefano Signore to provide an opinion from the European Commission, what Europe is doing in the region, and maybe start to reply to Mr. Ronneberg appeal about how to do more together. Mr. Signore, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this invitation. I really welcome this opportunity to discuss with all of you on this important topic. And I think the frame has already been made that we are all suffering from the impact of climate change. Céline, you have mentioned how hard Europe was hit during the summer with floods, with forest fires, with the drought. But we also know that we are not all suffering at the same level. Some countries, some regions are suffering more. And definitely the Pacific Island countries are suffering more. So we are aware that we are not at the same level of danger and exposure to the dramatic consequences of climate change. I was also particularly inspired by the remarks of the Prime Minister, in particular when he said that they don't want to blame, they want to save. That I think it's an important concept there, that we have something to say. I think that we are also in our political decision, we are highlighting more and more the importance of working on adaptation. Our President Ursula von der Leyen, in the recent State of the Union speech in the European Parliament, said that we need to do more robust work on adaptation and to make nature our #1 ally in the fight against climate change. And that is why we hope that both upcoming COPs 15 on biodiversity and COP 27, respectively in Montreal and Sharm el-Sheikh, will keep the level of ambition on biodiversity and climate. So where do we stand in our cooperation with the Pacific region? First of all, let me say that before entering into what we do in terms of support, in terms of cooperation, for us it's important to insist that our cooperation is based on a number of shared values: democracy, rule of law, human rights, partnerships. We really believe in a partnership of equal. And that is why, including in climate change environment, we are developing a number of alliances and partnership. That is why, for instance, at COP26, we launched the EU-Pacific Green-Blue Alliance, where we want to focus on climate action, resilience, and sustainable use of natural resources in 18 countries. But of course, it's also important what we do in terms of support. In the last multi-annual financial framework, 2014-2020, we invested almost 400 million euro on climate action in the region. This might seem not a huge amount of resources, but in fact, it was roughly half of the overall cooperation in the region. So €1 out of 2 that we have invested in the region was devoted to climate action. And this is the biggest share in all the region of the world in our cooperation. But also to give some ideas of the overall effort that the European partners are promoting in the area of climate action. For instance, if we think of the Green Climate Fund, which we know all how many resources can mobilize. The European countries have contributed for $4.5 billion, which is 45% of the world fund. And we know that this contributes to projects in Samoa, Vanuatu, Tuvalu, Fiji, but also in many other islands of the region, and the number of projects is expected to increase in the next few years. So 2 months ago, the Pacific Island leaders have issued a communique declaring that the Pacific is facing a climate emergency. And as I said, we really want to say that we as Europeans are also very concerned about the impact of climate change on the region. So let me give a few examples of the areas of cooperation. Of course, this is not exhaustive for benefit of time, but I will focus on 3 areas: oceans, adaptation and resilience, and renewable energy. Oceans is, of course, by definition, the most important element, I would say, in the region. And as the panel chair has stated recently in a briefing paper, Europe does have an interest in supporting fair, knowledge-based, negotiated solutions to protect oceans that have become the arena of geopolitical rivalry. Ocean are our life support system, and we as European Union are a strong player in ocean governance. Already in 2016, we adopted an international ocean governance agenda that was renewed in 2022. Therefore, ocean governance is a key priority also for the EU cooperation in the region. In particular, through our Pacific European Union Marine Partnership, we committed, together with Sweden, 55 million euro for a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainably managed Pacific Ocean. When it comes to adaptation and resilience, I would like to give one example, which is the Kiva Initiative that was launched in 2020. For the first time, the initiative brings together many partners, the EU, France, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Pacific Island states. Through the Kiva Initiative, we want to tackle climate change adaptation in the Pacific through the preservation, promotion, and restoration of biodiversity. Here it is about promotion of accessing nature-based solutions, providing technical support to many countries of the region, and the initiative is funded with 57 million euro and managed by the French agency AFD, Agence Française de Développement. The renewable energy has already been mentioned. Espen has mentioned the challenges. On the one hand, we know the emission of the island are marginal, not to say negligible. On the other hand, these countries have taken commitment, and more particularly to phase out dependency on fossil fuel will have a number of socioeconomic benefits for those islands. Therefore, let's say there are plenty of benefits that can stem from, let's say, entering into a fossil fuel-free energy system. Unfortunately, and this is not only the case in the Pacific, but many islands around the world still rely heavily on diesel generation for electricity supply, most of the time in the area of 70–80%. And this is why, let's say, for the time being, let's say the picture is not very positive, but we want to keep investing in supporting those countries to make progress in this area. Of course, we know there are several conditions that are not, let's say, conducive for those islands to put an end to fossil fuel dependency, but we think there are also many opportunities. And just to flag that we have supported energy sector reform programs in Tonga or in Samoa, but we are also put in place a specific regional window for the Pacific under one of our financial instruments, which is called Electrify, which support private sector investment. Now, the third element that I would like to mention is knowledge sharing, science, data. I would like to use this occasion also to congratulate the Pacific community for its newly developed strategy, which is called Resilient Blue Pacific, with the vision of the region as a place of peace and prosperity for all, but also a strategy based on people-centered approach to science, research, and technology. We'll mention a few of our interventions where we are supporting Pacific countries in this area. First one is CLIMSA, which is one of our most recent project in disaster risk reduction, basically supporting disaster risk reduction strategies into Sustainable Development Plan. There will be a meeting in Apia in a few days' time to take stock. But also under the 11th European Development Fund, we have funded the second phase of the Building Safety and Resilience in the Pacific project. This was worth 14 million euro. And there again, we supported the improved disaster risk governance, multi-sector resilience, and overall capacity building for preparedness, response, and recovery. Let me mention also the Living Labs. Living Labs basically developed together with the Research and Innovation Program of the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States. Living Labs allow to share local knowledge within a global research agenda and therefore develop inclusive and smart solution for climate adaptation. And I would also like to mention the digital technologies and the digital twin. We are willing to build a digital twin of the ocean. We are connecting our assets, Copernicus satellites, marine infrastructure, and high-performance computing in order to gather the data and turn it into real-time knowledge and longer-term prediction. A digital twin funded by the EU and its member states should be operational by 2024. It will make ocean knowledge open access available to citizens, scientists, and policymakers around the world. And it will be a platform for global cooperation, including the Pacific island states. Last point is about inclusiveness, and which is an important element for our approach to climate change, in particular when we come to the gender dimension. Women and girls are 14 times more likely to die or be injured than men due to a disaster. And in the Pacific, women also face the highest rate of gender-based violence in the world. Women and girls in the Pacific region experience constant inequalities, including very low levels of participation in decision-making. That is why we need to find ways to include women on an equal basis in decision-making. I was happy to hear that a month ago, Samoa launched a first of its kind Talanoa toolkit for village-based advocates against family violence, which was made possible by the Pacific Partnership to End Violence Against Women and Girls. And this was also made possible with the contribution of the European Union. So let me conclude. The sooner our countries will be able to shift towards zero emission and to strengthen their resilience to the impact of climate change, the better the future for humanity and the planet, in particular in those regions more exposed like the Pacific Ocean. We have a responsibility to find ways to make that happen now. I look forward to the discussion, and I am sure that through the question and answer, we can touch upon additional points. Thanks a lot. Back to you.
Thanks a lot, Stefano. Very interesting overview of what the EU is doing in the region. I think we lack at some point information about what the EU is really doing. So that's very good to have today several highlights of what the Europeans are doing in the region. And also thank you for highlighting the intertwining, I think, issues between climate change and the cultural lifestyle of the Pacific Islanders. I think all is should be seen together and not as a separated field of nature and culture. I think all should be seen together. And I'm now turning to Joachim Claudet, who is going to provide a perspective from the research. What are the research is saying about the Pacific Island and climate change, how to best tackle the challenge and how to work together. Joachim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Céline. Thank you all. I'm really happy and honored to be in such a distinguished panel. Yes, I will try to bring in some research perspective on climate change and especially in the Pacific and as you mentioned, how to address climate change. I mean, it's obvious for everyone, but the low-hanging fruit, the most impactful thing that can be done is mitigation. So cut off greenhouse gas emissions, obviously. Unfortunately, we're not doing that fast enough, if we're doing it at all. I'm questioning that. And even if it is happening, there is inertia in climate change. So climate change is here for a while. So we need to adapt to those impacts wherever we are taking actions now. And as John Kerry says, ocean and climate are two faces of the same coin. And although I do agree with that, I would add that biodiversity is also something very important in this equation. So ocean, climate, and biodiversity, and this makes a lot of sense, especially in the Pacific. So the challenges are foreseen for Pacific Island countries to tackle climate change are of three sorts, and they all relate to need for better integration. The first challenge is the fact that we not account enough that coastal communities in the Pacific are exposed to what we call a triple exposure. I will detail that in a bit. Then there is a lack of integration of local well-being dimensions, which very often are very specific to the Pacific. And the last challenge I see is that we are not working enough across sustainability domains, and there are 7 of those, and I will detail them also in a bit. So the first thing I wanted to mention is about triple exposure. So on top of climate change, coastal communities are exposed to unsustainable developments and to sometimes ill-designed or poorly designed conservation strategies. And all those they combine and they can form some form of vicious circle and increase the vulnerability of local communities to one or the other sources or to all sources at once. And so this leads to a lot of trade-offs. For example, if approaches to increase well-being of local communities is too much ecocentric, so driven by biodiversity, and I think about marine protected areas, for example. So we establish a fully protected area, no-take area in a place to improve ecosystem with the aim of improving resilience to climate change. And if we don't account enough of how local communities relate and depend on the ecosystem, for instance, for fishing, this might lead to conflicts and problems. And the other side of things, if we have approaches that are too much sociocentric, not accounting for the environment, and for example, with incentive for increasing the fishing capacity with the aim of improving well-being of people through increasing adaptation to changes in fishing resource, this might lead to overcapacity and overfishing and degrade the environment, and in turn have negative impacts on ecological adaptation to climate change. So it is very important to think about synergies and try to avoid trade-offs when designing adaptation strategies, accounting both for development, biodiversity, and climate change. And although, as has been said, Pacific Islands have a very little share in greenhouse gas emission and in mitigation efforts to be done, there is a lot that can be done in improving local management of coral reef to increase local adaptation of both people and nature. So this was the first point I wanted to make. Think about synergies. The second point is that there is very often a mismatch into globally designed success indicators, for example, SDGs, for example, and which are a generalized ex situ knowledge production, and local indicators of success, which are culturally grounded in situ knowledge production. And the two have to discuss more and be integrated more. And we need to rely more on multiple knowledge systems, because very often globally designed approaches to tackle and to increase adaptation to climate change, they don't account on dimensions of well-being that are very relevant in Pacific Island countries. For example, connectedness to people, connectedness to place, which is very important and grounded into the culture and livelihoods of the well-being. And also the indigenous and local knowledge, skills, practices, values, worldviews that are very specific and very poorly integrated in approaches to climate adaptation. So this was my second point. And my last point is to work better across the 7 domains of action for sustainability. So ocean health is one of those. It is very important. So it relates to mitigation of climate change, to protect and restore biodiversity, to avoid new impacts on species and ecosystems. At the same time, we need to foster equity and justice, which is very important in climate change policies. We need to ensure that equitable access to ocean resources and recognizing and protecting the rights of women and indigenous communities. This is key. And this has been said also before. We need to foster sustainable economic opportunities. And to do that, we need to invest in low emission sectors to create jobs that are based on a sustainable use of the ocean and on the ocean ecosystem services, and that fairly benefits local communities and not only foreign actors that use local ecosystem services. Also, we need to foster new financial mechanisms. That had been said before. We need to develop innovative ocean finance that are linked to climate and conservation finance efforts. We need more scientific integration. This is very important. We need to promote integration of social, natural, physical, and even psychological science in climate change policies. We need better ocean literacy. We need to understand better how we all depend on a healthy ocean. And finally, all this should concur to a more inclusive and more holistic governance. And we need to do that. We can co-design adaptive interventions, instruments, and policies to better foster sustainable management of the ocean and at multiple organization scales. And yeah, these were my main messages. And we need to have locally designed interventions, but we need to integrate them at the global level. And this is how Europe can play a very important role in adaptation to climate change of Pacific Island countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joachim, for the great analysis and the roadmap that you are providing to all the stakeholders here. And I would be happy to get your feedback, your reaction later on about what Joachim highlighted as an important factor to take into account for tackling climate change challenges in the Pacific. And now, last but not least, I will give the floor to the Honorable Minister of Bakoa, Kaltongga, from the Republic of Vanuatu. We already understood that Vanuatu is a very important player, a leader right now regarding climate change and how to tackle it. Also within the international negotiation and international organization. So, Minister, we are waiting for your remark.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair, for allowing Vanuatu to be part of this panelist conference on climate change. Good morning to some of you. Bonjour, buongiorno. It's evening in Vanuatu, or approaching evening. But basically, ours is litany of uncertainty and broken climate promises and the need for assistance, the need for attention, the need for consideration of issues. And this is considering the fact that 7 years ago, about 196 parties at COP21 in Paris signed a legally binding international treaty on climate change. And countries around the world celebrated this first landmark step towards what we hope would have been an accountable, transparent, and life-saving requirements to reduce the impact of global warming. So we knew then what we know now. Climate change is the world's greatest threat to development, sustainable economies, and human rights. And we're seeing it on TV, even in Vanuatu, the effect it's having on Europe, on your dried up rivers, the trade on the river trade, which is quite an economy. We are also measuring this sort of thing and we see. And so the Pacific Islands were the first countries to ratify the Paris Climate Accord. And small countries emitting the least amount of carbon and contributing the least amount of climate change problems. We led the way, and we continue to do so today. And we have no choice, because despite our efforts, we still face existential crisis and sustainability of our national economies, and therefore our level of well-being and livelihoods. The climate action is inadequate. Unless there is a radical shift in ambitions, we will overshoot 1.5 degrees in a few years. Everyone across the planet is already suffering intensified climate impacts. That's including your countries in Europe, our countries in the Pacific, and their impacts are not necessarily just islands sinking or waters flooding, but we're talking about collapse of agricultural systems potential and availability of drinking water. We're talking about the disappearance of coral reefs from acidification and bleaching, spread of pests and disease, including malaria and dengue fever. Recently, you would have witnessed landslides in Papua New Guinea, catastrophic cyclones that have happened in the Pacific. For example, in Vanuatu, they appear to be quite stronger now. When in the past 5 to 10 years or so, we've had 2 category cyclones which effects have reduced our GDP by half. And it's very difficult to sustain in a decade the sort of damage that's caused by climate change. And we lose about 96% of our food crops when we get hit by these catastrophic cyclones. So we believe there are certain fundamental human rights that are being undermined. We believe we all exist in this world. We have a right for food, water, shelter, and we believe more are compromised. And we're also observing that the human climate process is moving too slow. The Paris Agreement's nationally determined contributions do not match the legal obligations of states to defend climate harm as protected by international laws and treaties of human rights, the environment, the oceans, and then common law principles. In Europe, you face climate change challenges, you face climate change disasters, but you have the financial capacity to mitigate disasters. In the Pacific, we don't have, we struggle. We take a number of years to recover as a country, and therefore we're always on the back foot. And so, you know, fossil fuels projects are expanding, and the world's addiction to coal and oil and gas is deepening, especially after the war in Ukraine. We're seeing this from the Pacific, and we're already knowing it's going to affect us through climate change and global warming. The science is crystal clear. We will soon breach the 1.5 degrees, leading to terrifying loss and damage and ecosystem tipping points, which you would have heard speakers talking about systems to address this issue. So, you know, as small island states, we have no choice but to take the lead. And this is where Vanuatu is coming from. And that is, it's presenting and calling on the United Nations General Assembly for a resolution requesting the International Court of Justice to provide an advisory opinion on obligations of the states and the law to protect the rights and the future generations against the adverse effects of climate change. So an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice is not legally binding. You know, it's not litigation. No one wins, no one loses. There'll be no awards and no damages as such. It will be useful for states to formulate more ambitious NDCs to the Paris Agreement and strengthen their domestic laws and policies on climate change. And so, to be very clear, this is not a court case. We are not blaming nor targeting any particular nation. And there will be no winners or losers. Vanuatu is not alone. This is an initiative of the world's most vulnerable nations. And we are very grateful for the support we have received since this campaign started in the classrooms of our young people concerned about the future due to climate change, and if climate change is not stopped. And so major blocs globally, including first and foremost, the Caribbean leaders of the Caribbean, they sent us endorsements, all the countries, that they will support us in the United Nations. The ministers of the Organization of the African, European, African, Caribbean, and Pacific states. We recently had the full Pacific Forum endorse our initiative and give the endorsement that they will support our case in the United Nations. The African, Caribbean, and the countries Pacific of the EU government also gave the endorsements as well, that they will support the Republic or not, and endorse the ICJ pathway that we're undertaking. So, but we are, you know, we are also asking all UN member states, when you consider what you're seeing now from the television and on the TV, it's almost global, and that is the sort of approach we're taking to bring the climate change to the International Court of Justice for an opinion, and we believe we will all benefit across the globe on an ICJ international opinion to provide legal clarification on critical climate change issues and to address, you know, issues, such an issue similar to those sensitive issues that have been addressed, like the denuclearization, colonialization, and self-determination, to certain issues that were brought in front of the ICJ and had an opinion given by the International Court of Justice. So it's not an impossibility. And the ICJ initiative to us is an example of a constructive and non-contentious kind of transformative approach that global leaders should be calling for, and would provide all credible pathways to address the climate emergency, which should be pursued. And we'll feel that the ICJ is our best chance to do that. Simply, we require legal clarity on the world's biggest problem from the world's highest court. All principal organs of the net have been given the opportunity to provide guidance on climate change, with the exception of UN's International Court of Justice. We all need to better understand how existing international laws can be applied to strengthen action on climate change and to protect people and their environments. So what are we asking the UN for. The current draft UNJ resolution centers on human rights, environmental protection, and intergenerational equity. Does not contain any references to sensitive issues like compensation, reparations, or loss and damages. The International Court of Justice would be asked of its clarifying opinion on what is already contained within the existing international law and not make any new laws or require any new obligations. Of course, the resolution will undergo a process of consultation commencing mid-October through December before the UNJ vote. We are confident the IS Court is also ready to address climate change, to engage in science, and look holistically across international laws to provide constructive legal clarity. Young people and civil society organizations are calling on UN member states to support this resolution. The world is closely watching the outcome. Whilst Vanuatu is proud to take the lead on this initiative, we will be honored to have your endorsement and any influence you can wield to ensure all UN members vote in favor of this resolution in the upcoming 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Vanuatu, like most countries, believes climate change must be addressed now. 7 years is already too long to wait for action. It is the biggest risk to our children and their children, and we are asking for your support. If you cannot do great things, do small things in a great way. Asking your systems for your support with our initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think it was a very sobering and inspiring speech, and you provided very strong elements, and I especially like the way you framed the Vanuatu's initiative as a transformative approach to the issue. I think it is very much needed, and I think as you highlighted, there was already many support to this initiative, and I would like to invite also the other panelists to reflect on your proposals and the significance of the Vanuatu initiative on the ICG and getting an opinion from it. And so what I propose now is to go again for a new roundtable to ask for your various reactions to each other presentations, especially the roadmap detailed by Joachim, the various challenges to be tackled, but also how to provide a new opportunity or new idea or new approaches to increase, to strengthen the cooperation between the Europeans and the Pacific Islanders regarding climate change. What are the key assets of the EU? Is it possible to highlight them in a more specific way? How to find more complementary approach or synergy approach, and what is the expectations also from the Pacific Islanders beyond the support from to this new initiative, beyond some financial also support and assistance? How best to work together to achieve a satisfactory solution? So I would like to go back first to Espen to react to all this.
Well, first of all, I'd like to very much thank the Honourable Minister for his very impassioned statement. I completely agree with him as a person, and I know that SBC have pledged to support as much as we can. Turning to some of the other issues that were raised by Joachim and Stefano, I think there are great opportunities for cooperation between the Pacific and the EU countries. I mean, on the political level, I think we pretty much see eye to eye on what needs to be done. In terms of mitigation and so on. Perhaps where we need to do more is in the area of actual on-the-ground action. So where can we build on the institutional strengths of the EU system? Perhaps one example would be, I'm not sure if it's still in existence, but there used to be this commission of European Union islands. So I'm talking about the islands of Spain and France and Finland and so on, who would have get-togethers to talk about island solutions. Now, those are not tropical islands, but some of the approaches that they've been taking may actually work for us in the Pacific. So it's just an idea. Maybe we should have that cooperation between the Pacific Islands and the islands of the EU. I mean, we already do that with the overseas territories here in the Pacific, but they're perhaps not as well resourced as some of these other island communities. And they may have solutions, they may have options that could work for us. We don't know, we don't know. We don't have the information. We need to get the information on solutions that will work for us. The third point is around how support could be better targeted around capacity building and capacity support. Because like I mentioned, it takes us a very long time to get climate change projects even through the approval process, let alone getting them implemented. And there was a question put to me, what are the challenges around this? And it's around the conditions that are placed on us by the funding institutions. So we may get a water project approved, and the country will say, okay, well, we'll take one of our best water experts to be the manager of that project. He will be able to run the technical side of that project with no problems, but he's not necessarily an actual project manager. So he may not understand things around the financials, the reporting issues. And because there's this limitation on how much management costs you can put on a project, the country runs into a problem, because yes, you have the best person to run the physical side of the project, but you don't have the support that's needed to do the backroom side of the financials, the reporting, the auditing, and all of that stuff. I've seen this so many times, and it's really, really frustrating. Thanks.
Excellent, thanks a lot. Stefano, would you like to jump in?
Sure. Look, the first point I would like to make is, in fact, how important is for the European Union and its member state in the Pacific Island countries to work together in all the international negotiation and all the international fora. We know that together we can punch above our weight in terms of the diplomatic clout that we can have in those fora. We know, for instance, that at COP negotiation, we have managed to push, for instance, for, let me mention two areas. Mitigation clearly is an area where jointly we have pushed for more ambition, because if emissions do not decrease, we will not meet our climate targets. But also transparency is another area where we have managed to have a successful negotiation in order basically to simplify the life of small island development countries, so as they do not have the same reporting burden than the big emitters. So this, I think, is the first element I would like to make, is how important it is to continue working together. Of course, we have launched also recently new ways to cooperate. As I said, the EU-Pacific Green-Blue Alliance launched in Glasgow is one important element of that. And then let me also mention the fact that basically as of August last year, the European Union has become the first permanent observer in the SPC, the Pacific community. So this is also very important because, of course, we have always been working with the Pacific community, 250 million program as of 2007. And with this new permanent observer status, we believe that this will enhance the quality at the level of our partnership. Last element is about the sharing experience. Indeed, as it has been mentioned, there is an initiative which is called Clean Energy for EU Islands, which is managed by our colleagues of DG Energy. This is a very, very interesting initiative which promotes the exchange of experience amongst islands in terms of decarbonization. There are some really examples, El Hierro in Canary Island, it's fully relying on renewables. So there are experiences that can be shared, and we are happy to connect with our colleagues in working on that in DG Enel. Let me stop here, but of course happy to take other questions. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Stefano. Joachim, you want to add some remarks? Also, there is a question for you in the chat about how the Pacific Island people can best leverage international events like the upcoming COP27 to align on global objective and action from the bottom up instead of things being pushed down to them. So if you can address that also would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a large question, but I will try to have a very simple answer, and is get involved. To me, this is really how it works, and this is by getting involved, by showing how sustainable management of local resources can benefit both people and nature, can benefit both development and climate adaptation. It is by making local practices recognized as useful tools towards sustainability management. It is to show that not a single approach that doesn't account for blue justice, which is social justice, environmental justice, equity, can work. So make sure the voice of Pacific Islanders is heard, and make sure that local practices are sustainable, and this will make you to be heard. I think this is how it can work. And if I may, if I have time, I'd like to say two things about how to better cooperate between EU and Pacific Islands, or maybe it can be even broader up. I think the main solution is innovation, but I'm not at all talking about technological innovation. I'm talking about innovation in how we do things, innovation in governance, innovation in decision making, and at two scales, at the local level and at the international level. To me, there is no hierarchy, but I will start by local, but it's not less or more important than the other. And at local scale, I think we need more cooperation between scientists, decisions. I'm not saying that because I am a researcher, but I do think decision needs to be better informed by science, by evidence decision making. Local communities needs to be part of the decision because it is upon them that the action will be taken. And so to ensure action makes sense and will deliver the social, economic, and environmental benefits they are designed for, they need to be part of that. The private sector needs to be part of the decision. Not everything can come by states. We need to expect actions and incentives from the private sectors, and then the decision makers. So these four groups of people need to co-design the future of Pacific Islands. This is how it can work. And at the global level, many of the challenges I detailed before, one of the driver of those challenges I've detailed before is the fragmentation of governance. Climate change is dealt at UNFCCC. Okay, but we've said that biodiversity is part of climate change, right? But it's at the CBD. But we say that for climate change, the ocean is one of the main things. But where is the ocean? It's partly at CBD. But the impacts on biodiversity due to fishing, and IPBES showed that the main threat on ocean biodiversity is overfishing. It is dealt at the FAO and Regional Fisheries Management Organization. Impact on biodiversity and climate change related to deep seabed activities and mining is at the ISA. There is the IMO. There will be BBNJ, but who knows what it can be. It will be able to regulate because of all this fragmentation. And let's innovate. So one thing would be to have all these coming together and have an ocean new COP that integrates them all. I think it's not for tomorrow, obviously, but it's feasible. If we all want it, it's feasible. And before it happens, there is something very simple that we can do, is to stop schizophrenia and to stop sending different teams to negotiate in all those different agencies. Because it's not always a strategy by states to say something in one arena and do something different in the other. Of course, some countries have those kind of agenda. I will name no one, but some do have this agenda. But some, they just don't know. I mean, there are some people going to negotiate at ISA, and they don't have a clue at what the others are doing at CBD. And they don't know what the others are doing at UNFCCC, but in the same parties, the same countries. So let's integrate those thinking, let's integrate those action, let's integrate those policies, and make them all be informed by needs of communities and evidence developed by science.
Thank you very much, Joachim, for this very vibrant call for more coordination and more integration. But I think that it's kind of common sense, but it's the trickiest part to achieve at all levels and for many, many issues, I'm afraid, because now we are facing a lot of transversal challenges and we all need to make people, very different people, all together coming at the same table to discuss that, to adopt the same line, which is very difficult. And then we have to bring that to higher level. But
if I may, I don't think it's such a challenge because the skills and the expertise that is needed to negotiate by negotiators from states at ASA or BBNJ or IMO, who are they? They are lawyers sent by states, and then they have advisors, sometimes scientists, sometimes others. So the skill is the same. It's just the compartmentalization in national agencies that is different. So if it is ISA, it is this bureau of this ministry. If it is BBNJ, it's this bureau of this ministry. And the people, they don't talk to each other. This is a simple thing to do. It's not, yeah, but I think it's just a question of will. I don't think it's a very difficult task. It's just opening doors in agencies.
Okay, so Mr. Minister Kaltongga, what do you think about that? Is it so easy? We talked also about the limited human resources in the Pacific Islands. So does this make integration and coordination easier, or is it more tricky for other reasons?
Well, look, you know, I don't dispute what the panelists are saying today, and also, you know, like that, for example, Mr. Ronneberg on highlighting some of the structures and issues in the Pacific, all his assistance to the organization. And also thank the European Union, Mr. Signore. I have been the benefit of some of this assistance, and I've seen what Europe is bringing in. But you know, for Vanuatu, I think we need to have a more practical approach on a country basis, and as you will appreciate, Mr. Claudet, that you know some of our public finance system is AAA rated, and therefore some of especially the European, you need to appreciate this as well. Perhaps for some of the projects that will assist us in climate change, and perhaps we need to move beyond the mechanisms of negotiations, but perhaps not just projects, but go into budgetary support, because we have a strong system to implement some of these projects, and perhaps pick a few areas that have a great concern and deal with them in a separate manner, because we appreciate the EU puts a lot of money in the Pacific, but when you divide these funds into programs and then into countries, the effect is so minimal. To the extent that we don't feel that we're making a change out of this generally, and it's very difficult to convince our people sometimes. And so, you know, a commitment to, for example, elimination of fossil fuels, and the fact that Vanuatu, you know, has a policy, you know, to be 100% fuel efficient, renewable by 2030, which is quite ambitious. The mechanisms of you know climate green trading between the private sector and Vanuatu. How we have our constitution that is unique to ourselves, that recognizes indigenous land ownership of trees, ownership of all this. So this sort of partnership, if we develop between companies, European companies, and our communities, this is something that is workable and sustainable. And you are able to claim credit, you know, credit in carbon trading. The more money you put in solar farms, the wind farms, and we gain through the fact that we're promoting renewable energy. So these are the sort of things that we're not seeing enough of, which is probably difficult, and that because in the UN, FCC, and the Paris Agreement, there was supposed to be a sizable amount of fund that was promised that would be dispersed amongst countries that are facing major climate changes. And whilst Europe, and we appreciate the contribution of Europe, the European Union in this respect in assisting climate change, but it's, frankly speaking, it's just not enough when we divide it among. And it's not only the Pacific, you're talking about the Caribbean, small island countries. You're talking about your programs in your small islands, which perhaps, as per Mr. Ronneberg's allusion, that perhaps, it could be translated into the Pacific Island countries, but whether we could sustain it financially in the long run. And these are the sort of integrated systems that perhaps, Mr. Joachim Claudet is trying to tell us, which I agree to in some form, but we need a more practical approach. Frankly speaking, we need more money and we need more direct identified areas that we can spend the money in. For example, climate change in the tuna industry, for example, it's affecting our tuna. We're losing revenues. Our tuna stock is moving out into the other countries. And that's a major revenue that we're losing. So we need to deal with the oceans in some ways. That's the sort of thing that we're experiencing now, that we know that 10 years down the line, if we don't act on this, we're going to suffer, period. And it's a fact. We can't deny it. We're seeing disasters all over the place. We have to relate it to something. Somebody's going to have the blame or something's going to have the blame. But thank you very much for at least listening to our concerns.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think it's very important to say very candidly what we all think, and things like that, what are in the reality and what are the real expectations from each other. I think this kind of frank and candid dialogue is very much needed, and very fruitful, I think, to engage in more cooperation. So thanks a lot again, Mr., for being with us today. And so our time is almost up, and I would like to give a last chance to our panelists to add a final word. Espen is already in, so Espen, you're going to be the first. Jump in.
Yes, no, I just wanted to bring up, I mean, we know that adaptation is really the big priority for the Pacific, as the minister has very ably articulated. But we do have opportunities for mitigation and renewable energy in the region. We have a surplus of biomass that we don't use. In Samoa, where I live, we have about 30% of the coconut harvest that goes to waste. We could turn that into biodiesel. And I know for a fact that there are companies in Europe that know how to do this for us, but we just don't have the financing or the arrangements to make it happen. So that's one thing. On the adaptation side, I do think that there are opportunities for us to work with other island communities. We already have cooperation with the Caribbean in terms of exchanging of ideas and so on. They've taken a slightly different approach than what was done in the Pacific, but still it's valuable for us to do that cooperation and exchange. So if that can be further supported, I think that would be of benefit not just to us, but also to the Caribbean. So those are just my last 2 cents. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Espen. Joachim, Stefano, would you like to say a word?
I can do, yes. Look, very quickly also, because I think a lot has been said, and just to say that the Honorable Minister is right when he says that first of all, we are not, let's say, complying with the overall collective commitment to reach the $100 billion US, as we know. We are not yet there, so we hope that we'll be there by somewhere 23 or 24, but definitely this is missing. And within this wider framework, also the money that is reaching small island development countries in the Caribbean, in the Pacific, is not sufficient for many reasons. Therefore, the first issue we need to tackle is to make it sure that, let's say, within this wider climate finance conversation, those countries can access funding more easily. This has to do with technical assistance, with capacity building, also with the way of working of many of our partners. But this leads me to a second consideration, which is the following, that irrespective of how much public climate finance we will put on the table, and hoping that we will manage to reach the 100 billion goal, this will never be sufficient, because the needs are so huge that we need to mobilize all the other partners that are able to contribute. Therefore, the private sector, the banks, the multilateral financial institutions, and in particular to make it sure that more money can go to adaptation relevant projects, because we know that as of today, mitigation projects are much more likely to attract funding than adaptation projects. So this is an effort that we all have to do. I think there is an awareness in the financial system that this has to happen. The banks are telling us that they are ready to put technical assistance and more means on the table, but of course we also know that this is not so easy to make happen. And the last point has to do with budget support, which is a modality that we are using also in the Pacific with some 10 countries. So we are doing, in fact, a lot of actions of budget support. Whenever this is possible, we believe that this is a modality that can work to directly support the administration, the authorities in these countries that do need to be supported in this. So let me again thank all of you for this very, very timely and interesting panel. And I give the floor back to you. And thanks, Céline, to you in particular for excellent moderation. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Stefano. Joachim, would you like to
yes, so maybe very quickly, because I see we have only 1 minute left. I would say that Europe and more globally, many countries have a long track record of sustainability management that failed, that costed a lot of money, but that failed. So let's get inspired by that. Let's not reproduce those things, and let's not reuse existing recipes. We need to innovate in how we become the new stewards of the planet and nature, to better integrate all forms of knowledges, including scientific knowledge, but not limited to it, to have a shared theory of change. And unless we really have sustainability as the main target, there is not a single action in one of the domains of climate, biodiversity, ocean, whatever, that will work. So we need to integrate and we need to innovate.
Excellent, all in a nutshell. So very successful recipe. And now, Honorable Minister, if you want to take the last few seconds.
Well, we've circulated the UN resolution draft to 23 countries who are working on it now. And we have the support of over 80 countries. And we're working with support of more countries. So all I can say is I would appreciate your assistance in talking about the support, lobbying support for Vanuatu on this issue, because we believe it's for everybody. It's for the safety and security of the world population and the basic right to human life. Comfortable environment. So, and thank you. and God bless you in your endeavors. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Minister, and thanks all the speakers for this very stimulating session today. I think it's very useful. The video will be soon available on the internet. We can share to our friends and also stakeholders. And we will also produce a briefing based on the discussions today, so that to disseminate more broadly what was said this morning. At the program on the Pacific Islands, the Ifri SPC, our upcoming event, it's for December. We'll talk about food system. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all there. And finally, I would like to end by thanking our partner, the Pacific Community, and especially Olivier Auguin, who is a representative of the SPC in Paris, very energetic and supportive. So thanks a lot for making this possible. Have a good day, have a good evening, have a good night, wherever you are. And I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
See you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.